Pacers embarrassed in game one of their first round series against the Milwaukee Bucks, down as much as 30 in the first half to the Bucks. What went wrong? Was there any positives? Key adjustments for game two? Damian Lillard, Pascal Siakam, Haliburton with 7 shots. We'll talk about all of that today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, y'all. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we have got to talk about game one, the first playoff game of this new era of Pacers basketball, and boy, was it ugly for the Indiana Pacers, who were down by 1 late in the first quarter and then down by 30 late in the second quarter. Holy smokes, was the end of their first quarter bad. Their second quarter was atrocious. Rick Carlisle, first thing he says is sitting down for his post-game press conference, called it embarrassing. And it truly was. Pacers, everything you could say about them early in this game. Inexperience, not ready for the moment, not ready for the physicality. Young, all of it was true. They looked terrible. Found some stuff in the second half. No one wants to hear positives today. We'll dabble in them. Some adjustments, some stuff that was very head-scratching throughout the game. We'll try to cover it all as much as we can here in the 5-star form. I'm still on the court. As you can see in the background, lighting is super weird. It looks like my head is really wrinkly and I'm 10,000 years old. But we will dive right into a very strange game one. And that's where I think this all starts, is what I mentioned just a second ago about the score and game flow of this game, right? It was so ugly early in the game. Like I mentioned, it was 20-19, and it kind of felt like the Pacers were in it or at least battling. That was really late in the first quarter, which is not noteworthy because it was a 1-point game, although that is sort of noteworthy for the Pacers at that point in the game. The thing that makes that noteworthy was 20-19 with a minute and a half to go in the first quarter. The Pacers' offensive start was really bad. Right, 19 points in almost 11 minutes to start the game. They already looked like a team that was, I don't even know what the perfect word was. The moment was very big. Their offense wasn't very good. They were giving up open shots defensively. The Bucks just weren't making them early in this game, right? And they were down 1. Sure, their bench had just come in and did an interesting thing or two, but they were still down. And then immediately over the next 30 seconds, the Bucks went crazy. They got up by 8. They were up 9 at the end of the first quarter, and it was just an avalanche in the second quarter. The all bench unit was god awful to start that quarter. We will talk about that in a second. That should not have been a lineup that was on the floor. The lead reached 10 really quick, then 13, then 19 in the blink of an eye. 8:18 to go in the second quarter. It was a 19-point game. Remember, this was a 1-point game with a minute and a half to go in the first quarter. That's how quickly that avalanche happened that took this game from a 1-point game to an 18-point game. And that's where the Pacers looked young. And it was a very strange moment in the game. A lot of people had questions about this. Siakam and Haliburton not on the court for that moment. Very surprising to me to see that happen. They both played a bunch of minutes. That did not happen again in the second half, but clearly a mistake that they cannot go back to, right? I asked Rick Carlisle about having one of them on the floor for all 48 after the game, and he said, you know, it's something that worked for them during the season, and that's true. Their depth was strength during the season, and I did a whole segment on this very podcast about that 5-man bench group doing well, but I also talked about how I didn't think McDermott would play much, if at all, in the postseason. He played in this game. Ben Shepherd, relying on rookies in the playoffs, can be finicky. He played in this game, was not great. Missed a bunch of important shots, especially in the second half, right? And even TJ McConnell, 5 for 13, wasn't as good as him. Their bench was not good. And when they had all 5 of them out there and that group wasn't working, it really comes to light and says, why is this group the one out there? Had it clicked like it did in the regular season, I don't know if that question would have been asked as much, obviously, but it's results driven. And when it doesn't work in a setting where you don't typically see that kind of lineup, of course, it's fair to ask a bunch of questions. It was very puzzling and it did not work at all. And my camera just tipped down. But I think that, you know, that was a really key moment in the game. That lineup really turned things. And so even as starters continued to kind of trickle in, I would say, like they subbed in Isaiah Jackson for Jalen Smith during that avalanche. It didn't really slow anything down, right? They finally subbed with 8:30 to go, down by 17. In came Myles Turner, Haliburton, and Nembhard. And they scored it right away, but then it really quickly kept going and getting worse, right? They got it to 17, but then right back to 20, 22, 28. It got out of control. And I think it peaked at 30. I can't remember exactly what the score was when the Bucks were up 30, 35-65, I believe was the score. And that was the apex. And the Pacers played much better after that point. But it really avalanched from that late first quarter moment to late in the second quarter, a little bit under 12 minutes of play where the Pacers just looked horrible, right? And a lot of guys talked about this after the game. There were no one wants to admit that it's, first game and inexperience and all that stuff. That sounds bad. It is bad. They're a young team. That's a bad reason to lose. You would like to lose because you play well, but not quite well enough because of Dame, or, you generate open shots, but they're not falling, but their defense keeps you in it. You lose by 5. Losing because you feel inexperienced and overwhelmed is not good. And I didn't watch it, but it was referenced post-game in some media settings that Lloyd Pierce apparently said at halftime that jitters, felt like a factor for this young team. And of their rotation guys who played in this game, Isaiah Jackson, who did play in that second quarter stretch, no playoff experience. Tyrese Haliburton, no playoff experience. Ben Shepherd, no playoff experience. Andrew Nembhard, no playoff experience. Jalen Smith, extremely minimal, yet he has some, I suppose. And he was on a team that did play into the finals, but it doesn't matter right now. That's a lot of inexperience, and it matters to even play at all and see the physicality, right? It was a physical game. There was double text. There was Bobby Portis and Siakam doing that. It was a physical game, but they were not ready, right? They were not ready, and that's terrible. That's not what you want as a young team. They talked all week about feeling ready and feeling confident, and they weren't. There's a difference between having played in the playoffs before and not, right? Chris Middleton talked about it, after the game, that this is what players get excited about and live for, and the Pacers now experienced it for the first time. Damian Lillard talked after the game about, how crushing it was for him to not be in the playoffs all these years, and how he went to Coachella last year because he wasn't in the playoffs. He's never been to Coachella before, and all this stuff that guys who have been there understand, and the Pacers didn't early in this game, and that cost them. That, along with their rotational stuff in the first half, was brutal. And then, of course, the other thing that is extremely significant in the being down 30 in the first half, Damian Lillard was holy crap on fire. If you see the court behind me, any spot you look at on the floor, he made a shot from there. And so some of that's to his credit, right? Some of this was Dame pulling up from forever, like he had a late shot clock one, I think, over Jalen Smith. That was just gross. He pulled up, late in the first quarter from so far away with the defender's face. Perfect shot, right? So some of the stuff he was doing was insane. I think the last point he had it was he had 33 points and the Pacers had 33. For a while in the first half, he alone was keeping up with the Pacers, right? Unbelievably good play from Dame. So it starts there. He's an amazing player and played amazing. But if you remember, a couple things Dame related. One, the way they defended him really early was tricky. They were trying to chase over screens maybe that's to try to coax him to drive. Maybe that was so the big could deter him for just long enough for that player to get back. But it didn't quite work. Once they started blitzing him more, it changed up how he approached things. It changed up how the Bucks, were able to get their stuff going. But they had to adjust because he was so good early, and they weren't quite crisp enough on all those coverages. Some players talked about that in the locker room after the game, and chasing him over is tough. I get the idea, especially if the big is ready to stay in front, but that's hard to do. And it wasn't just threes, right? He made 11 shots in this game. 5 of them were twos, almost half, and he had 7 free throws, right? He was attacking the basket. He was getting into the paint. Only 3 assists, right? Clearly he was trying to shoot. He was trying to score, and he did. That's why he had 35 points. In the first half, he played so well, I was Googling the playoff scoring record. And then he didn't score in the second half at all, which is kind of jarring. And we'll talk about that at the end of this a little bit. But he was the final kind of nail in the coffin of all that coming together. Some really early jitters that was clear, even before the avalanche of Bucks going on a run. When it was, a whatever point game, 1 point game late in the first quarter, the Pacers only had 19 points, right? Their offense wasn't really humming, wasn't really clicking in the way you expect of the Pacers, even in a setting like this. The rotation, going 5 bench guys. They went 11 deep in the first half. I guess McDermott came on the floor and came right off. But Isaiah Jackson played as well, and Jalen Smith was not playing well. They needed to make that change. But 11 deep in the first half. Some of that searching for answers. Some of that is trying a bench group that worked in the regular season and was just abysmal in this game. And not having one of their stars on the floor at all times cost them. And Dame, equally fantastic. He was better than some of the stuff the Pacers did was bad. I don't know if that sentence makes any sense. But he was brilliant in this game. And that really was, the whole game, was that stretch from late first to the second. They kind of recovered. I tweeted they never recovered after the game. That was inaccurate. They kind of recovered. They got it to, I think, 10 or 12 in the second half, and we'll talk about their second half in a second. But that stretch where it goes from 1 to 30 in basically 1 quarter of play, that's the game. You cannot come back from that in a playoff setting. The other team has all the momentum. They're at home. They have mega talents. They have stars, and that absolutely crushed the Pacers. And that was not everything that killed the Pacers in this game. 7 shots for Tyrese Haliburton. The non-Dame minutes were still a disaster for the Pacers. A lot of other Pacers players really struggled and were not meeting the moment in this game. So much more to talk about as we continue here on the Locked On Pacers podcast from game one of their series. Before we get to any of that stuff, though, let's talk about two wonderful groups of people. The first one being the good folks over at Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person, as competitive as some Bucks players were in this game. Some people think that's true, some don't, but I think I have a competitive side. I think everybody does, and my competitive side's a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you money, big money. But the best part is messing with your friends. Charge them rent on your iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly. But you can also heist their vaults to get riches for yourself. Leaderboards to show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just your competitive side that loves it. You can team up with your friends, people around the world, in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game. Join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play Store. Let's also quickly talk about Game Time, the best way to buy tickets to any event. And it's now Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and any tickets. You know how I know? I used it. I went to New York. I wanted to go watch New York Liberty play the Dallas Wings. Fired up the Game Time app, and everything was fantastic. I could click on a bunch of different ticket spots and see what the view from my seat's going to be. Loved the tickets I ended up getting, of course, and it was spot on. It was exactly what I wanted to see. I knew the price was cheap and the lowest it could be because of their lowest price guarantee. Game Time credits you 110% of the difference if you find cheaper tickets in the same section. Your purchase is covered with flexible customer service policies in the ticketing industry. All those views, all in prices right there, so there's no surprises when you're checking out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. How about that? Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We keep rolling here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, of course, Locked On Bucks. Here what Camille and Justin have to say about Game 1, the Damian Lillard masterclass. Great game from Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis with some huge plays. They have to be feeling very good on the Bucks side about this. People talking very poorly about them. More people picking the Pacers than the Bucks. And they responded like a team that has playoff experience, that has some former champions, that has Damian Lillard. They looked amazing. They had the best player on the floor for a lot of this game. Not all. Pascal Siakam ends up outscoring Dame and adding 14 rebounds. He was truly tremendous. He would have been the story had the Pacers won. And they did have a chance. They cut it to 12. Again, we'll get to some minor positives at some point. But Dame was so good that in such a short amount of time, too, that I have to give him the player of the game nomination. Okay, other stuff that really cost the Pacers in this game. I have so many notes. I'm trying to run through them. The rigid rotation in the first half we talked about. Dame going crazy. Tyrese Haliburton in this game, 7 shot attempts. Now, look, I'm not just going to say this as a Tyrese Haliburton was way too passive. And some of this was, there was a 3 in this game. Everybody tweeted about it. Like, everybody saw it. It was so obvious. TJ McConnell took 2 threes on one possession. They were both wide open, but one of them, Haliburton, was also wide open right by him, and he just did not get him the ball. Myles Turner acknowledged after the game, like, some moments they have to get Haliburton the ball more often. Like, he said they had some sort of team leadership meeting with him, Siakam. I don't know if Haliburton was involved in that or not. The phrasing was a little complicated, but either way, they were trying to talk about ways to get Haliburton going and more involved because he finished 4 for 7 in this game. He made 4 of his first 5, so he was at 80% at that time, but only taking 7 shots in 38 minutes was jarring. 9 points, 8 assists, 3 turnovers for Haliburton. Only -3 in his 38 minutes, right? That's bad. -3 is bad. That's below 0. But in a game they lose by, I can't do math top of my head, 15, clearly he was more impactful than without him on the floor, which of course is a rotational discussion. But 7 shots, I mean, that's jarring. And if you go back to their regular season, he took 7 or fewer shots 4 times during the regular season. Here are those 4 games. The game against the Celtics where he got hurt and only played 13 and a half minutes. He took 5 shots that game. Against the Hawks, right before that, he took 6 shots. He made 4 of them. They won that game by 34, and he only played 25 minutes in that game. March 1st, they played at New Orleans. He was past his minutes restriction, but he only played 22 minutes and 41 seconds that night because he was 0 for 7. He stunk. He had 0 points. They were getting their butt kicked. He didn't play hardly at all in the second half. And the other time he took 7 was when they lost to the Warriors, when he was on his minutes restriction, or at least kind of coming out of it. He was 2 for 7 in 25 minutes and 49 seconds that night. The reason I run through the game time is the most minutes he played in the game this season where he took 7 or fewer shots was under 26. He played 25, 49 that Warriors game. Tonight he took 7 shots and played 37 minutes and 43 seconds. So he was out there. He was playing. He was still kind of impactful, and I'll get to the why in a second, but was not shooting enough, was not looking at the rim enough, was being deterred by the Bucks, right? They did a really good job. Credit to Patrick Beverley and really the Bucks schematically. They were really forcing him left. I'll never forget being in Sacramento last year. Haliburton returned to Sacramento for the first time after the trade. The Kings did a wonderful job defending Haliburton. Malik Monk asked straight up in the locker room, right at his locker for the Kings, what'd you guys do so well on Tyrese? Why were you able to slow him down? He said, we forced him left. We want him to go left, right? And that's his former team. I don't remember if him and Monk were teammates, but you get the gist. Like, that was significant to them and part of what they felt like was significant in them getting the win in the way they did. The Bucks did a good job of that. They sent 2 guys to him a lot around ball screens to at least encourage him to pass or look for his open teammate rolling towards the rim. And Turner, who's often the recipient of those passes, 5 for 17 in this game, 2 for 7 on twos was Myles Turner in this game. He had 17 points on 17 shots. I don't think he was woefully ineffective. They won his minutes by 2. He had 2 steals. He had 2 assists. He had 8 boards. But that was not an efficient enough night when specifically Haliburton's getting defended the way he was. Jalen Smith, another recipient of those passes, missed all his shots. He had 2 points there, both at the foul line. Isaiah Jackson didn't shoot the ball. And there were other guys, obviously, but, generally it's the big man coming off of that. Siakam was also coming off of that stuff, and he was incredible. Again, we'll get to positives later. But, that was huge. The Bucks did a really good job of shading him left and forcing him and his natural instincts of pass first to play like that. He passed up. He had 8 assists. He had 7 boards. He had 8 assists for the Pacers, who shot under 40% as a team and missed their first 14 threes in this game. That might not be exactly right. Maybe it was 11. I can't remember. It was more than 10. That says a lot about how they defended him and his night, but he has to take more than 7 shots. Even if he can find ways to be effective without doing it, he has to take more than 7, right? And so usually the reason he took very few shots in the regular season, the reason it looks like they have a good record when he takes few shots is because he barely played because they were crushing the other team, right? So I don't think that's a totally fair way to assess his low shot games. They actually have a very good record in his high shot games too, and he takes 18 or more. Their record is sensational, right? So there's obviously the way he's being defended, it matters in the wins and losses for all that kind of stuff. But 7 is really low, and it's almost too low. And even on a night where he's 4 for 7, that kind of illustrates the point, right? If you remember, even before the season started, I don't know how many shots is the perfect number for Haliburton, given the way he was being defended in this game. But I said, he's a very good self-creator. He creates his own shots. Good things happen. He can get to the rim. He can make threes. He didn't in this game, but he can make threes, right? That's generally a more efficient shot than a lot of what they get running their offense normally. Him taking a shot or trying to find his shots is generally an effective thing for the Pacers. That's why I said he should up his shots this season from 14 to 16, 17, 18, whatever, before the season even started. And it's going to be hard for him to do it given how the Bucks are defending him. But I think the Pacers have to try to find a way to get him well more than 7 shots, well over 7 shots in this game. That was not good. They needed him to be better than that. The shooting was a problem for the Pacers, like I alluded to. I can't remember their exact first 3 that they made. I believe it was Myles Turner late in the second quarter. But they missed their first double-digit threes, right? And that can go back to the first game jitters thing we talked about for a lot of these guys. That can go back to their woeful execution. That can go to a lot of things, but that did not go well for them. The other thing that I wanted to get to is, if you listened to the last podcast I did before the series started, my final segment was about a big number that was influencing my Pacers in 7 pick in this series, and that is the Bucks number specifically when Giannis and Dame aren't on the floor, because that made me feel like, well, if Giannis doesn't play for any amount of the series, I feel good about the Pacers winning, not because they're going to smoke the Bucks when Dame's on the floor, but because when Dame isn't on the floor, the Bucks have not been good, which makes sense given what their roster is, and the Pacers can take advantage of those moments. Well, in this game, Dame was incredible. We all know the stats. I've already read them. 35 points, right? Was unbelievable in the first half. Again, I was Googling the playoff scoring record at 63. The Pacers won the minutes with Dame on the floor. -6 was plus minus very unintuitive in this game, which says a lot about what the stat can or can't be. But the Pacers did good on Dame in the second half, right? He didn't score in the second half. Either way, with Damian Lillard on the floor, the Bucks were -6. With Damian Lillard off the floor, the Bucks were +21. That is a big factor in the Pacers losing this game, is the minutes when the lineups had Pat Beverly running the show or Pat Connaughton running the show or whatever. They were fantastic. Patrick Beverly +17 in this game. He was amazing. Chris Middleton +25. Bobby Portis +23. Those moments when the starters were playing without Dame early in the second quarter, early in the fourth quarter, the Bucks were amazing. That's when they really took off in the first half. That's when they put it away in the fourth quarter. That is where the Pacers must be better. And some of that was the overlap of those groups with some starters on the floor for the Bucks and the Pacers bench, which had been good in the regular season, but was woefully ineffective in this game. Really terrible bench game, right? Again, questions for Rick about going to a 5-man bench group. And in general, the bench's poor effectiveness in this game. Ben Shepherd couldn't play 10 minutes. McDermott only played 6 minutes. He was -17. He should not. That should be an easy adjustment for the Pacers. We'll get to that, right? But losing the non-Dame minutes, something I thought would be critical in my Pacers pick of Pacers in 7. That crushed them. That absolutely sunk the Pacers in this game. And Dame was so good to start this game. He had 0 points in the second half. Pacers figured some stuff out with him, and other guys stepped up for the Bucks. But the fact that they won the minutes with Damian Lillard not playing in this game, with Damian Lillard playing in this game. And again, plus-minus was finicky. Siakam was unbelievable, and they were -9 in Siakam's minutes. That crushed them. That absolutely killed them. They got smoked that bad with Dame off the floor. I actually thought starting the second quarter, there's a big stretch for the Pacers. Dame's off. He just had that amazing first quarter. Pacers can chew up some ground here, go from down 9 to, let's say, down 6, down 5. Their starters come back in. Maybe they're right in it. Instead, they were down, I can't remember, double digits when Lillard returned to the floor. I want to say they were down, I think they were -11 in that stretch with Dame in the first half on the bench. That killed them, among many things in this game for the Pacers. They're down 0-1 in a series. Myles said it after the game. The common saying is, a series ain't over until, or a series really flips when a road team, I can't remember exactly. A series doesn't start until a road team wins. That's what it is. Well, a home team won, so the series, as expected, right? But this is different because Giannis isn't playing. What adjustments can the Pacers make for now? Very important game 2. What was actually good in this game that they can lean on in game 2 that was effective in this game? That's how we'll close out today's show. Before we talk about any of that stuff, though, let's talk about Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Over 3 million members, where it's easy to play. You just pick more than or less than on 2 or more players and stat projections. March is over, but now with college basketball done, it's time for the NBA playoffs. Get in on the playoff action. Win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can earn up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks. As well as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and college basketball entries today on America's #1 fantasy sports app. It's easy to play on Prize Picks. They have all the sports you could imagine, all the stat types you could imagine. You just pick a player, and are they going to go more than or less than on that stat type? For example, Anthony Davis in Lakers Nuggets, more than or less than 2 blocks. For example, Damian Lillard, more than or less than 4 3-pointers made. Well, in this game, that would have been a more than for Damian Lillard. That's how you play on Prize Picks. You pick 2 to 6 players in that vein, and you can win. You can win, and you can win big, up to 100 times your money during the postseason. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. Again, download that Prize Picks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100 on Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And we close out today's show. Thanks for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every day. Locked On NBA should be your second listen. We're going 7 days a week on Locked On NBA, breaking down every series in the league. I was on there at the end of the play-in tournament last Friday. Other guys on there today, breaking down some more game 1s. Home teams looking very good, although I don't know the Thunder Pelicans score right now. But home teams looking very good in game 1s of these series. Let's finish up today talking about a couple positives and some adjustments for the Pacers. We'll start with adjustments. One I already said, so I'll just keep going on that. Doug McDermott should not play. -17, didn't make a shot. I got the idea of him being out here. Okay. I'm not trying to defend anyone. Here's what I'll say. There was a stretch late in the third quarter where the Pacers cut the lead. Let me try to find it and be specific with the numbers. The Pacers cut the lead down to 12. I think in the second quarter, it peaked at 23, about in the middle of the quarter. But I want to make sure I have these exactly right so I can talk about exactly what happened. Okay, so the Bucks were up 58-81 with 6 minutes to go in the second quarter. they're dominating, right? In comes TJ McConnell right around that time, right? And not long after, in comes Obi Toppin, in comes Jalen Smith. The bench is out there. In comes Ben Shepherd with 3 minutes to go, right? And in comes Doug McDermott with 40-something seconds to go, 39 seconds to go in the quarter. In that stretch, in that last 6-minute stretch, the Pacers cut it, like I said, from 23 to 12. It was a very good stretch, one of their best of the game. It was 83-71 at the end of the third quarter. So the bench was really good in that stretch. That was the best stretch for the Pacers bench the entire game. And then they kept the bench going in the fourth quarter after the bench was good and changing the game. And then the lead immediately got back up to like 15 in like 2.5 minutes. And everybody said, why'd they keep the bench out there? Why not bring the starters back in? Because they were really good. They were the reason the Pacers even made the comeback in the first place. That said, McDermott came in very late in that stretch. I incorrectly said on Twitter, well, he was in during their comeback run. That's why he was out there in the fourth quarter. He was not really in during the comeback. He came in so late that maybe was unfair to say. Minus 17. This is a 15-point loss for the Pacers. They lost McDermott 6 minutes and 40 seconds by 17 points. He was not very effective in this game. I think an easy short in the rotation decision is to not play him. I did not think they would go 10 deep. They did. They really went 11 deep, although I don't know if that's fair to say just because Isaiah Jackson playing instead of Jalen Smith when Smith was struggling in the second half. Yes, that's two players playing, but it's a net positive to add the extra player there. Either way, trimming the rotation. Like they played 38 minutes of Haliburton, 40 minutes of Siakam. They have to do that again. They might even have to up Haliburton a little bit, but they need to, Nembhard played 30 minutes. That's got to be the same. All the starters played a bunch of minutes. I think they just need to shift a little bit of McDermott to Ben Shepherd and a little bit of McDermott to Andrew Nembhard, who is just under 30 minutes. And that'll be the rotation, at least the rotational changes that I would consider as the Pacers. That's adjustment number one. Adjustment number two, don't go over on Dame. I mean, I don't know exactly how they should defend him because he can get his shot off so easily against any sort of coverage. And I get why they were trying to coax him into certain things by doing that, but it wasn't working, right? And so blitzing him, trapping him, whatever, forcing him to see two guys, get the ball out, keep it moving. I think that would be what I would try to do to start game two. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do on him. But again, he only had 3 assists. Like he didn't have to move the ball that much to be incredibly effective in this game. Make him move it a little more, make other guys beat you. And that did work for the Bucks. Brook Lopez made half of his shots. Bobby Portis made a bunch of shots. Chris Middleton made a bunch of shots. But with the way Dame played in the first half, you would have, if you're the Pacers, preferred to live with some of those other guys. I think that's an adjustment number two the Pacers can make. I already talked about Tyrese Haliburton, trying to get him a little bit more involved. And adjustment number four, the lazy one. Don't be so jittery to start the game. They missed long a lot, right? They clearly some mental hurdles with the shooting. Like it wasn't just barely short, just barely long. They were missing right a lot. Like they had 3, I think, from the left wing that hit nothing, right? Hit the backboard, didn't hit the rim. Sorry, there's a lot of noise behind me. Clearly making shots is not an adjustment. They were trying to make shots, but getting over some of the mental hurdles, I think, is important. I asked Siakam after the game about, what does he view as someone who played very well in this game and has been through playoff series of all varieties before. What does he think is more important for this team going into game two? Mental adjustments or schematic changes? He said, really both, right? We've got to make some adjustments, but we need some mentality shifts. That was an inexperienced game. We played very poorly. We've got to be better. Positives, if there are any. No one wants to hear positives, so thankfully I can bury them 28 minutes and 20 seconds in. No one wants to hear positives when a team loses by 15 and trips over themselves at an opportunity to win when Giannis does not play. Positives, Siakam, unbelievably good. Siakam outscored Dame. Dame had 35 points in the first half. Siakam ends up outscoring him, obviously holding Dame scoreless. In the second half, a big part of that, and that is a positive. They adjusted well into Dame. Siakam had 36, 14, 2 and 2. He was fan-freaking-tastic. He could settle into the shots he wanted. He could get to the foul line, 10 free throw attempts. He was terrific. I think ensuring that keeps happening for the Pacers is going to be absolutely vital in this series. I thought that was really good. I thought the Pacers really ratcheted up the defensive intensity and focus in the second half. 14 points allowed in the third quarter, only 40 allowed total in the second half. That is, at least if you're the Pacers, a hope of something that you can continue, right? Try to draw from the good of that half. Try to draw from the successes of that going in to their next game, because those were the real positives. The second half adjustments were good, right? That's what you hope, if you're a fan of the Pacers, continues. They can continue to adjust throughout the series in a way that is meaningful, is positive, and can continue to get them wins because they were better in the second half. They defended well. They slowed down Dame. They got Siakam rolling. They cut it down to 12. But there's still some other things that they can do, and some of it is just make some freaking shots, right? Shooting under 40%, 20% from deep. That's brutal. At one point, they were 0 for 10 from deep with 7 turnovers. I think that was in the first quarter, right? That adjustment is just play better But I think that is those four things. I think were the keys to me in terms of the biggest possible adjustments the Pacers can make. There's going to be a lot of little stuff they try to do. Certainly, game 2 is very important. I think Myles Turner is right that until a road team wins a game, a series is kind of just status quo. But this was not this. That's not the same this time with Giannis not playing. If Giannis is not playing game 2, it's not a must win. It's only 1-0, but Pacers really, really would like to get that one. Come back home with a win and feel good about where they are going into game 3. And even if Giannis does play, it's obviously a very important game for them to win. But not like about the Pacers playing this game, especially in the first half. Again, Rick Carlisle all over. He called it embarrassing. I think it's exactly right. It was embarrassing. Fans very frustrated in my Twitter mentions today. He said it's ugly. They've got to own it. No excuses. We simply have got to come out better. I could not agree more with Rick Carlisle. But also, his rotation is something he will, of course, have to adjust and have be better in game 2. We'll have more coverage of this series tomorrow, maybe with a guest, maybe not. Being in Milwaukee on Central Time, and I have a lot of stuff to do here, obviously. We'll see if I can get a guest. That's my hope for this going forward. A Pacers guest, preferably at this time, and then a Bucks and a Pacers guest in the 2-day gap between games 2 and 3. So lots of good stuff coming here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. It's playoff time. It's the important games. Hopefully these podcasts can be exciting, interesting, important. And again, we're in Fiserv. We'll be here again on Tuesday. Hopefully we can podcast from this exact setting again, so it's all fresh in my brain right after the game. It's still about midnight Eastern. Actually, it's only 11 Eastern. I have my computer still on Eastern time. So got lots coming for you guys, both in terms of writing and podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I probably said many things or forgot many things. Let me know about them so I can address them tomorrow by either commenting down below on YouTube or tweeting at me at Tony R. East or at Locked On Pacers, where you can find this podcast. Again, talking more about game 1, the importance of game 2, adjustments for game 2 tomorrow with the guest. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.